This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game features Max, MJ, Nick, and myself battling it out. Max is playing as Jon Irenicus, the Shattered One, and he's hoping to give away his commander. He keeps Myriad Landscape, Bojuka Bog, Island, Crux of Fate, Demonic Tutor, Charcoal Diamond, and a Thieving Skydiver. MJ is playing their Tymna and Ravos deck, keeping Armageddon Clock, Banisher Priest, Swamp, Plains, Panharmonicon, Angel of the Dire Hour, and a Concealed Courtyard. I'm still playing Shorikai despite some people not wanting to see this anymore, and I keep a Shimmer Dragon, Arcane Signet, Thirst for Knowledge, Intruder Alarm, Soul Ring, Plains, and a Sculpting Steel. Last but not least, Nick wants to cause some pain playing his Liesa deck, and he keeps a Tainted Field, Plains, Temple of Silence, Assault Intercessor, Kaya's Wrath, Soul's Attendant, and Path to Exile. Nick wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws, plays a Plains, and casts Soul's Attendant. Max just plays a tap Myriad Landscape. MJ plays a Concealed Courtyard, passing. I draw, play a Plains, and cast Soul Ring. I tap the Soul Ring for an Arcane Signet, and pass. Nick plays a tap Temple of Silence, scrying 1. Max plays an Island, and pays 2 for a Charcoal Diamond which comes in tapped. MJ's got a Swamp for turn, and passes to me. I draw and have enough to cast Shorikai, but with no land to play, have to pass. Nick plays a tap Shambling Vents, and pays 2 for an Orzhov Signet. Moving to combat, the Attendant goes at MJ for 1, and Nick passes after it connects. Max plays a Bojuka Bog which comes in tapped for no value, and then pays the 2 to crack the Myriad Landscape to find 2 lands and pass. MJ plays a Plains and then casts Tymna, which has Nick gaining 1. I'm not going to bother to narrate all the life gain, just assume that it's happening in the turn. I draw and play an Azorius Signet, and then activate Shorikai. This has me drawing 2, discarding a card, and making a pilot token, but finding no lands, so I pass to Nick. Nick plays a Tainted Field, and then casts a Blood Clock. He then swings the Soul's Attendant at Max, who takes the hit. Max takes 2 from the Blood Clock, and then draws, and plays his own Arcane Signet. He then plays up Jon Irenicus, and moving to his end step, puts 2 +1/+1 counters onto his commander, and gives them to MJ with goad. MJ takes 2 and draws. They play a Swamp for turn and go to combat. They swing Jon Irenicus at Nick and Tymna at Max, who both take the hits. In their post-combat main phase, MJ loses 2 and draws 2 with Tymna, and then casts a Panharmonicon. I take 2 from the Blood Clock and draw, and finally draw an Island which I play for turn. I then cast Tezzeret the Seeker, down ticking the Walker by 0 to go and find an Ancient Den. I pass to Nick after that. Nick takes his 2 and draws. He plays a Plains and casts an Isolation Cell to add to the stacks. Going to combat, he pokes MJ for 1 with the Attendant and passes. Max takes 2 and draws. He plays a Thieving Skydiver, putting 4 into the X, and targets Shorikai. I respond by activating my commander, drawing 2, discarding a card, and making a pilot, and Max then steals it. With nothing else, he passes. MJ also takes 2 and draws. They go to combat, swinging Tymna at Nick and Jon Irenicus at me. We both take our hits, with MJ losing 2 again and drawing 2 in their post-combat main phase. They then play a Temple of Silence to scry 1, and then cast an Auriok Champion, losing 2 to the Isolation Cell. They pass after that. I take 2 from the Blood Clock trigger and draw. I then downtick Tezzeret for 2 and find a Talisman of Progress. I then play a Sculpting Steel and have it come in as a copy of Shorikai so I can at least have my commander, and follow it up with an Unlicensed Hearse, passing to Nick. Nick returns its Soul's Attendant to the Bloodcock trigger and draws. He plays Kaya's Wrath, blowing up the board, and then replays Soul's Attendant. He passes after that. Max takes 2, draws, and plays a Homeward Path. He then replays Jon, and moving to his end step, gives me Jon Irenicus this time that's goated and has 2+1/+1 counters. MJ bounces a land to the Bloodclock and draws. They replay the planes they bounced and cast a Surtur Priest. They follow up with a Banisher Priest, exiling Jon Irenicus and the Soul's Attendant thanks to Panharmonicon. Max then puts Jon Irenicus under the Banisher Priest, and MJ passes, while I exile 2 cards from their graveyard with the Hearse and activate Shorikai to draw 2 and discard 1, and we move to my turn. I take 2, draw, and play a Razortide Bridge. I then play Urza, Prince of Krug, and take 2 from the Isolation Cell. I then float 3 mana with the Azorius Signet and Sol Ring, and untap them with Tezzeret, and then do it again for a total of 6. I use the mana to activate Urza, making a soldier copy of Sol Ring, and pass to Nick. Nick takes 2 and draws. He plays a Swamp, and then casts his commander, Liesa, and passes. During his end step, Max activates my Shorikai, drawing 2, discarding 1, and makes a pilot. Max bounces the pilot token on his upkeep and draws. He then plays All Is Dust, taking 2 from Liesa, and activates Shorikai in response. This then wipes away the board, and with the Banisher Priest leaving, Jon Irenicus comes back. He moves to his end step and gives it back to me, and passes. MJ takes 2, draws, and plays a Plains. They recast Tymna, taking 2 and pass. I take 2 from the Bloodclock and draw. I play a Plains and cast Rise and Shine, overloaded, to animate all of my artifacts before moving to combat. I swing everything at Nick, and he responds before damage by casting Path to Exile, targeting my Hearse. He blocks Jon with the Soul's Attendant, but still takes 25. After that, I donate Jon Irenicus back to Max and pass. Nick bounces a Plains and draws. He replays the Plains before casting Assault Intercessor, and with nothing else, passes to Max. Max bounces the Bojuka Bog to the clock trigger and draws. He then plays Sakashima of 1,000 Faces on Jon, paying the 2 for the Isolation Cell. Going to combat, he swings Jon at MJ. Moving to his end step, he has both Jons, the Sakashima and real one, donate themselves to MJ. He passes after that. MJ takes 2 and draws. Going to combat, they swing the original Jon Irenicus at Nick and the Sakashima at me, and Tymna at Max. Nick animates the Shambling Vents and blocks Jon while I take my hit, and so does Max. MJ then plays a Swamp in their second main phase and moves to their end step, giving the original Jon back to Max and the Sakashima to Nick before passing to me. I take 2 and draw. I play a Glacial Fortress and then tap enough for a Shimmer Dragon, taking 2. Going to combat, I swing everything at Max this time. But MJ decides to intervene with an Angel of Dire Hour to exile my attackers. With my board significantly cleared up, I have to pass. Nick bounces a Swamp and then replays his land. He recasts his commander, paying the 2 life instead of the commander tax, and goes to combat. He swings Sakashima at me, letting Max draw a card off Jon Irenicus, and I chump with my Soldier Sol Ring token, and then tap it and my Arcane Signet to draw off the Shimmer Dragon. The Sol Ring token then dies, and Nick passes after that. Max bounces a land and draws, and then plays Bojuka Bog to exile Nick's graveyard. He then casts Living Death, which does leave the 2 Jons in play since they can't be sacrificed, and MJ gets a Necrotal back, This blows up the thieving skydiver and Urza as it enters. Moving to combat, Max swings both Jons at Nick for lethal. On his end step, Max then donates both Jons to MJ before passing turn. MJ draws and plays a Swamp. They then play a Sun Titan and bring back Tymna. They then pass, donating both Jons to Max at the end of turn. I draw and play a Hollowed Fountain, which comes in tapped. I then play Urza, Power Stone Prodigy, and cast Intruder Alarm, passing after that. Max has a Creeping Tar Pit for turn, and going to combat, he swings both Jons at me and the Elder Brain at MJ. I block both Jons with my creatures to chump, and MJ casts an Angel's Grace before they're forced to exile their hand thanks to the Elder Brain. They then double block the Brain with Tymna and Necrotol. After combat, Max evokes a Shriekmaw, blowing up the Sun Titan, and gets to untap his creatures thanks to Intruder Alarm. Going to his end step, he donates the Sakashima and Elder Brain to MJ and passes turn. MJ draws, and seeing as his creatures didn't untap, Max flashes in MJ's Alms Collector exiled from Elder Brain to untap them. Going to combat, MJ's forced to swing both creatures at me, and with no blocks, I have to die. Max then draws 2 from Jon's ability, and after combat, MJ casts a Chromatic Escape to at least save themselves from attack for the next turn at least. After that, Max activates Homeward Path on his end step and takes back his creatures, and MJ passes. Max draws and plays a Choked Estuary, which comes in tapped. He then casts a Demonic Tutor, and plays out a Lord of the Pit. After that, he donates the Lord to MJ and passes. MJ takes 7 from the Lord of the Pit on their upkeep, and removes a Suspend counter from the escape before drawing for turn. They then play out a Palace Jailer, exiling Max Sakashima and Elder Brain, and MJ passes after that. Max draws and casts a Merciless Executioner, and MJ responds by casting Sudden Spoiling and targets themselves, which will allow them to sacrifice the Lord of the Pit. Max decides it's time to sacrifice the Alms Collector, and then casts a Phantasmal Image. This comes in as a Palace Jailer, exiling MJ's Palace Jailer. With the way clear of blockers, Max is then able to swing Jon Irenicus in, and gets the win. Game review time. So that was a lot to track thanks to Jon Irenicus. The amount of times that he was passed back and forth made it so that attacking people was kinda complicated, but ultimately pretty fun. I think we might have missed one attack and a couple draws, but Max did draw quite a few cards from people attacking each other with Jon Irenicus. This is exactly what he wanted to do with the deck, so Max was very happy for this win. If you hadn't guessed by now, MJ's Tymna and Ravos deck was a cleric-themed deck. They ran a lot of cards that they loved to play, like Armageddon Clock, which was just a fun inclusion. In a similar vein, Nick's Liesa deck was themed around things making you pay or lose 2 life. It had a lot of clerics, so it kinda was themed as well like that, and it was just a pain to do anything as long as Nick was alive. I continue with my greedy keeps, and I think I would have been in a good position had that thieving skydiver not stolen my Shorikai. I'm so surprised that this card doesn't see more play since people can steal soul rings and all kinds of great mana rocks, not to mention powerful artifacts, and it just seems like a great value card that is often overlooked. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.